Most people believe that doing good is enough. History suggests otherwise. Outcomes are shaped by those who understand power, not by those who simply wish well. This video is not about becoming cruel or unethical. It is about understanding why moral intentions alone are rarely sufficient and why awareness determines who changes the world. Machiavelli was not interested in comforting people. He was interested in explaining why so many well-intentioned people lose. Living in Florence during the early 16th century, he watched a familiar pattern repeat itself. Men who were decent, principled, and sincere would rise with hope, only to fall with confusion. They believed that goodness would protect them, that fairness would be rewarded, that integrity alone would be enough, and again they were outmaneuvered by those who felt no obligation to play cleanly. Machiavelli's most unsettling realization was simple. The wicked often win, not because they are smarter, but because they are freer. They are unburdened by scruples that slow decision-making. They are not paralyzed by moral hesitation. They adapt quickly, lie easily, intimidate without shame, and charm without sincerity. When force is required, they use it. When deception works better, they smile instead. And while good people argue about what is right, the ruthless quietly take ground. This is not because goodness is inherently weak. It is because goodness, when paired with naivete, becomes predictable. And predictability is fatal in a world governed by power. Most societies teach a comforting myth that to be good is not only morally superior, but strategically wise, that noble intentions naturally lead to noble outcomes, that persuasion should always replace pressure, that kindness should always overcome cruelty, and that honesty should disarm dishonesty. These ideas are emotionally appealing. They feel dignified. They allow us to feel superior even when we are losing. But Machiavelli could not ignore what history showed him. In Florence, he watched honorable princes fall because they trusted promises that were never meant to be kept. He saw fair-minded statesmen destroyed by rivals who had no problem weaponizing rumor, fear, or bribery. He observed merchants who believed trust would be reciprocated, only to be ruined by those who understood leverage better than loyalty. Niceness, when practiced without strategic awareness, did not civilize politics. It removed people from it. This is why Machiavelli wrote The Prince, not as a celebration of cruelty, but as a warning to the well-disposed. It was a manual for those who wanted to do good, but kept losing to those who did not care. His message was uncomfortable, but precise. You may remain good at heart, but you cannot afford to be innocent in method. The world does not punish wickedness consistently, but it always punishes ignorance of wickedness. Machiavelli's advice was not to abandon morality, but to stop treating morality as armor. Good intentions do not protect you from manipulation. Fairness does not disarm those who profit from chaos. Kindness does not neutralize ambition. These traits must be accompanied by strength, adaptability, and an understanding of how power actually operates. One of the deepest roots of our confusion, Machiavelli believed, came from the moral stories we inherited. In particular, the Christian ideal of virtue modeled on Jesus of Nazareth, the gentle, forgiving, sacrificial figure who accepts suffering and is rewarded in eternity. It's a beautiful moral vision, but Machiavelli asked a brutal question. What happens if divine intervention does not arrive? Viewed purely through the lens of earthly power, Jesus was humiliated, betrayed, abandoned, and executed. His moral victory came after death. His political effectiveness during life was non-existent. Machiavelli was not attacking faith. He was attacking the assumption that saintly behavior guarantees worldly success. If you expect history to reward purity automatically, you will be disappointed. The problem is not that virtue is wrong. The problem is that virtue without strategy is fragile. It depends on the cooperation of others, cooperation that is often withheld. Tyrants, opportunists, and manipulators do not play by moral rules. They play by incentives, and if you refuse to understand their tools, you will always be reacting rather than shaping outcomes. This is why Machiavelli's Prince is so often misunderstood. It is not a guide for villains, it is a survival manual for idealists. It teaches those who want a better world how to avoid being crushed by those who want power for its own sake. Machiavelli's insight was that effectiveness must come before purity of method, not because purity is unimportant, but because failure helps no one. A defeated moralist does not make the world better, he simply exits the stage. If you care about justice, you must understand intimidation. If you care about truth, you must understand propaganda. If you care about kindness, you must understand cruelty. This does not mean becoming what you oppose, it means understanding it deeply enough to counter it. Machiavelli believed that the good politician must study the bad one. The sincere leader must observe the manipulator. The ethical entrepreneur must understand the tactics of the unscrupulous competitor. Not to admire them, but to neutralize them. You cannot disarm a weapon you refuse to look at. The world does not judge us by our intentions, it judges us by outcomes. History does not record what we meant to do, it records what happened. And those who cling to moral purity while losing repeatedly end up changing nothing. This is the most painful lesson Machiavelli offers, that good people often comfort themselves with the belief that they failed because they were too kind, too honest, or too pure. This story protects self-esteem. It allows failure to feel noble. But Machiavelli strips away that comfort. He suggests something far more unsettling, that we failed because we refused to learn, because we underestimated our opponents, because we believed moral superiority would substitute for strategic competence. Those we despise most often understand power best, not because they are smarter, but because they are unencumbered. They experiment, they adapt, they learn quickly from success and failure, and while they may fight against the values we hold dear, they often possess the tools required to make things happen in the real world. If we want to change reality, we must understand reality as it is, not as we wish it to be. Machiavelli does not ask us to abandon our values. He asks us to stop confusing virtue with effectiveness, to stop believing that goodness alone is sufficient, to stop treating power as something that belongs only to the corrupt. Power exists whether we claim it or not. The question is who wields it. Ultimately, Machiavelli cared less about how pure we feel and more about what we achieve. The goal is not to live comfortably inside good intentions. The goal is to shape the world in meaningful ways, and that requires learning from uncomfortable sources. He disturbs us because he refuses to flatter us. He exposes the stories we tell ourselves to avoid responsibility. He reminds us that morality without strategy is sentiment, and sentiment does not survive contact with power. To do good in a ruthless world, one must understand ruthlessness without being ruled by it. That is Machiavelli's challenge, and that is why he remains dangerous, relevant, and impossible to ignore.